Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
This is Susan Brender, and this is my show, The Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is an author, an activist. His name is Professor Harvey Wasserman. He hosts California SOLARTOPIA at KPFK in Pacifica in Los Angeles and the Green Power and Wellness podcast at PRN.FM. He's the author and co-author of 20 books, including SOLARTOPIA, Our Green Powered Earth and History of the United States. I want to welcome to my show Harvey Wasserman, and I really would love you to talk about, Dr. Wasserman, that you've been a long life activist who speaks and writes and organizes widely on energy, the environment, history, drug war, election protection, and grassroots politics. How did you get involved in that, and why is that so important to you?
Well, my parents were very liberal thinkers. My mother was an activist with the League of Women Voters, and I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. And in 1962, I was a junior in high school, and there was a roller rink for roller skating that was segregated. And we went down and demonstrated, and we actually won. And I thought that was the coolest thing. So, just that we could go out and make a change like that. And so it was a real confirmation, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. Now, you've been teaching since 2004 history and cultural and ethnic diversity at 2 Central Ohio colleges. Now, with that in mind, when you go to those classes and you teach, do you find that your students, what are they most interested in? Because today things have changed, and climate change, for example, is a very big topic. But of course, we're going to really get into a little bit about what happened in Los Angeles recently. So again, I would like to know what young people today are most interested in.
Well, it varies. Some of them are interested in the fact that they have giant student loans. I met a friend of one of my daughters the other day who has $200,000 in student loans, and she's, 30 years old. So it's absolutely insane. And if the Democrats really want to get rid of Donald Trump, they'll mobilize the millennials. There are 85 million millennials in this country, and a huge percentage of them have immense student debt. And as far as I'm concerned, if the Democratic nominee had better campaign on abolishing student debt and abolishing medical debt. I think that the kids are, the young people today are, and as I said, between the early 80s and early 2000s, you got 85 million people born, and they are being crushed by these financial burdens, as well, of course, as climate change and all the other issues, and the coming of an outright fascist in the White House. So, if any of these Democrats can show a pulse, that's what they should run on.
Now, it sounds to me like Donald Trump is not one of your favorite presidents, and you just discussed the fact that students have a lot to pay for their schools, and it's really kind of a catastrophe, if you will, because when you get out of school, you don't always get jobs, and not only that, but the jobs don't pay enough to pay off the student loans. So let's talk about how Dr. Wasserman would solve that problem.
Well, if this American Hitler can levy a $1.5 trillion tax cut for the super rich, then maybe we can take power and have a $1.5 trillion program to negate student debt. Seems to me fair enough. And then our young people can get out from under and lead decent lives and make this country great again.
Yeah. Now, you work primarily for the permanent shutdown of the nuclear power industry and the birth of SOLARTOPIA, which is something that you've been involved in quite a long time, and a Democrat and socially just green-powered Earth free of all fossil and nuclear fuels. It's not really realistic. Are we talking about something that can change, say, on a dime? What do you think about that? And let our audience know a little bit about this whole notion of what the nuclear power industry is doing at the moment.
Well, nuclear power plants, there are 440 or thereabouts commercial atomic power plants operating in the world. There are 97 in the United States, and they are the number one threat to the survival of the human race on this planet. I'll say that again. Commercial atomic power plants, 97 in the United States, 440 worldwide, are the number one threat to the survival of the human race on this planet. 5 of them have blown up. They operate at 300 degrees centigrade, and the boiling point of water is 100 degrees centigrade. They are absolutely insane. All nuclear power plants emit huge quantities of heat, radiation, and carbon. They're the number one cause of global warming because all they do is sit around all over the planet and spew out gargantuan quantities of waste heat, extremely inefficiently generating less than 10% of the electricity, less than 10% of the energy in this country, less than that worldwide, and they cause enormous damage to the environment, and they harm people with radiation. Everybody listening to this show should see the HBO series on Chernobyl. It's been the number one watched series in history, actually, and it will give you a pretty decent look at what can happen to a nuclear power plant. There's virtually no regulation of nuclear power plants in this country. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is a Soviet agency, actually, very corrupt, totally corrupt, dominated by Trump people who have absolutely no concern for the future of the human race or the safety of people nearby or the planet. All they care about is the short-term profits of the corporations that own them.
So with that said, what is the alternative? Because there's just a few, and there's a lot of controversy around that particular subject, which I'd like to discuss. Now, what is your alternative to the nuclear plants?
We have a long-standing, very well-established, and extremely efficient and profitable industry with 4 basic components: solar, wind, batteries, and LED efficiency. And those are the 4 pillars, the 4 legs of the table, where we can completely revamp, and we're in the process of revamping our energy industry globally, worldwide. That's where the jobs are. That's where the future of energy is, and that's what has to happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, and what does that cost to society?
Nothing. It's cheap. It benefits society. The renewable energy is the absolute requirement on this planet if the human race is going to survive. It creates the jobs, it creates the cheap energy, and it protects the environment. If we do not convert 100% to renewable energy, our species has no future on this planet. Simple as that.
Now, as you know, there is quite a controversy over the issue of climate change. Some people think it's a cyclical thing and that it's really not produced by the society. They think that it just is something that happens, and in 400 years from now, it's going to happen again. And that's the reason that it's, really going on. Now, how would you respond to something of that nature?
Well, those are large corporations who have investments in King Kong, what I call King Kong, C-O-N-G, coal, oil, nukes, and gas. Those people are protecting their investments. I'm sure there are a few other people who sincerely believe it, but it's ridiculous. And it's actually irrelevant because it makes more sense economically and certainly ecologically to convert 100% to renewables. In fact, I would advocate a total free market in energy, abolish all tax breaks and all subsidies to all forms of energy, and nuclear power will disappear, fossil fuels will disappear, and we'll go 100% to renewables.
Interesting. Now, there is, you are part of something called SOLARTOPIA. Now, I'd like you to give our audience an idea of what SOLARTOPIA is and how you really made it happen, because you're involved with so many different people, and it's amazing about what this group is doing. So what's the definition of SOLARTOPIA from your point of view?
Well, SOLARTOPIA is a vision of a green-powered Earth. It's the book I wrote, which is at Amazon and my website, is 100% a renewable vision. It means that all the fossil and nuclear fuel burners, and they are all burners, are shut, and we get 100% of our energy from solar panels and windmills. And we back that up with batteries, and we reduce our energy use with efficiency, primarily LED lighting and other devices like it. And that's how we proceed to power our green-powered Earth. And that's where the jobs are, and that's the survival of the human race depends on that.
You just mentioned various different things, like the lighting that's using this new technology. So there's a lot of new technology coming up. And if you were to discuss this with, say, an audience of people who were, students who really want to enter certain kinds of careers, let's talk a little bit about lighting and the changes that exist right now.
Well, lighting has been, of course, there were incandescent lights, and they were incredibly inefficient, and hopefully we're phasing them out as fast as possible. We have fluorescent lamps, which are more efficient than incandescents, but are not as efficient as LED. LED is a very, very simple technology. Less of the energy goes in for heat, and incandescents, almost all of the energy in an incandescent bulb is wasted with heat, but that's not true of LED. And we need to LED also. The bulbs last much longer, and the light is way more flexible. It can do different colors and different levels, and it's a easily decided, necessary change.
Yeah.
And, go ahead.
No. Please finish. I'm sorry.
So, and it makes economic sense, except to the companies that have investments in incandescents and fluorescents, and also in using more energy than they need to. So, it's time that we need to do this kind of conversion as rapidly as possible.
Yeah. Now, let's get down to the real brass tacks of something that you've written about, which is very close to people's hearts, because they're, it's a kind of frightening equation, and that is the quake to make Los Angeles a radioactive dead zone is what you wrote. And you say we are this close, and I'll use that again, this close to an unimaginable apocalyptic horror. Now, I want you to tell our audience a little bit about what happened in Los Angeles and why you call it an unimaginable apocalyptic, and I have trouble saying that, I have to tell you. But, why this meant so much to you and that you decided to write an article about it.
Well, I live in Los Angeles now, and I have children and grandchildren, and there are 10 million people in Los Angeles County. And the reality is that we just had earthquakes, 7.1, less than 200 miles from Diablo Canyon. And those earthquakes could have absolutely destroyed the Diablo Canyon nuclear plants and sent a huge apocalyptic cloud pouring down the coast of California and into Los Angeles. The prevailing winds are from north to south, take about 5-6 hours for the radioactive cloud to get from Diablo down to Los Angeles, and the entire region would be essentially wiped out. People would die by the millions. The property would be utterly destroyed. The financial destruction would be incalculable. The Central Valley would be destroyed in terms of food production. You're talking basically about the death of California, the death of the United States as an economic entity, and a radioactive cloud that would absolutely kill millions. And, if you want to get a fairly graphic representation of this, watch the Chernobyl series on HBO. But there is no reason to believe that the nuclear plants at Diablo Canyon could withstand the kind of earthquake that just happened less than 200 miles away.
Wow. I have to tell you, my son lives in a place called Playa Vista, which is right outside of Los Angeles. And when I had a discussion with him the other day, he said to me, he said, Mom, I just have to let you know that our whole building was shaking, and I really had to lie down under a table because the shaking was incredible. And, he's an East Coast kid, and his experience really told a lot about how people felt in California about this. Now, the same thing, if this were a situation about, of course, California, do people all over the country, how did they respond when you wrote this article, and how did they respond to you in general when you talk about this apocalyptic horror? It must be incredible. I'd love to know how your students, what they think about that.
Well, it's so staggering and so horrifying that a lot of people just get PTSD and can't deal with it. I mean, this is serious stuff, and it's almost incomprehensible. We've had 3 Mile Island, which should have taught everybody to shut all the nuclear plants right then and there. That was 40 years ago, and we still haven't shut them all. In fact, we're just in the process of shutting the one next door. It's our species seems to have a remarkable death wish and total denial for the reality of what we're looking at here. People just can't handle it. And like in that movie, you can't handle the truth. And I don't blame them to a certain extent because, you're talking here about 10, even more than 10 million people being engulfed in a radioactive cloud. And you're talking about one of the great cities on Earth being utterly destroyed. And that's the reality.
Yeah, but with that said, Dr. Wasserman, the article in the newspaper and the situation that happened a few weeks ago in Los Angeles was very prominent. You can read all about it, and people, kind of were saying, oh, my God, this is amazing. However, if you live in places outside of California, it doesn't seem to me that people are that, really concerned. Is that true?
Well,
you must get feedback.
There's opposition to nuclear power everywhere. We have stopped a lot, in 1974, Richard Nixon said there would be 1,000 nuclear power plants in the United States by the year 2000. And in 2000, there were 104. And had it not been for the opposition, the no nukes movement, maybe we would have had 1,000 nuclear reactors. God forbid. There would be no future for the human race whatsoever. That's where it's at. We have had an impact, and it's been all over the country. Wherever nuclear power plants have been built, there has been opposition. but the corporations have been able to get these 104 reactors. We're down to 97. There are 2 still being built in Georgia. You've got a bunch of irresponsible lunatics running around saying that nuclear power helps global warming, which is an absolute lie. Nuclear power makes global warming worse. And, it's a struggle, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, a lot of stars and entertainers in California have been involved in this grassroots campaign, if you will, with you to discuss all these issues. With that said, do they have a significant role to play in really getting people to listen? Because people don't listen. They're always involved in all sides. Everybody's busy. So, who would you like on board to really speak to the issue that you feel so horrified by?
Well, we have great people on board. I mean, the China Syndrome, the movie that came out simultaneous with 3 Mile Island, had a huge impact. We've recently had Jane Fonda sign on to a petition to get Diablo Canyon inspected. The petition we just circulated, and people can go to moveon.org and find this petition and sign it, asking the governor to inspect Diablo Canyon. So, and to, because Diablo Canyon, we know, is cracked. It's embrittled. It is not being properly maintained. It cannot withstand an earthquake. And, all these things, we have had, like I say, this petition has been signed by Mimi Kennedy, Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Francis Fisher, Jody Evans, Lila Garrett, Martin Sheen, Eric Roberts, Ed Asner, just an amazing, Ed Begley, just Graham Nash, just an amazing list of people have signed this petition.
Yeah.
And the governor hasn't even bothered to respond. So,
yeah.
It's outrageous.
Yeah. Now, I always like to give my guests the last word because I think that there are certain things that we probably didn't cover. So with that said, what would you like to tell our audience?
Well, the future of the human race depends on shutting all these nuclear plants before the next one blows up. We cannot sustain as a species the amount of radiation pouring into the atmosphere and the devastation of our water and our climate with the continued operation of these atomic reactors. We have the technology with wind and solar to completely shut all nuclear power plants and convert entirely to renewable energy. We have, not only do we, it'll be better for the environment, but our future depends, our survival depends as a species, our children, our grandchildren, ourselves, on getting these reactors shut before the next one blows up. And we go to our petition at moveon.org. You can get my book, SOLARTOPIA. You can get active and shut the local nuclear power plant. All this has to be done as soon as possible. We have had success in shutting reactors, and we've got to do it 100%, get all 440 of them shut worldwide, or we as a species have no future.
Dr. Wasserman, if people want to get in touch with you to kind of learn a little bit more about the subject matter and to become involved if they have the desire to, how do they do that?
You can email me at solartopia@gmail. Email me at solartopia@gmail, and I'll be glad to correspond with you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have Dr. Wasserman, Harvey Wasserman, on the Susan Brender Show, talking all about some of the disasters that can take place and a little bit about politics, which some people might say, well, he may agree with you, and some people might say not. So with that said, let's do this again, Dr. Wasserman. It's really interesting, and I think a lot of people would find it fascinating, and they can have an impact. So with that said again, thank you very much for being on my show.
Thank you. I enjoy it, and keep up the good work.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.